I see Councilmember Murillo now.
Okay. Just text her. Yeah, and Marcano, Councilmember Marcano just texted me saying he'd be about 3 minutes. So
Okay. And Laura just texted me. She's having some Wi-Fi problems and asked us to go ahead and get started when we're ready.
he's heading to his office, so he should hopefully be there in a minute or so.
Sounds good.
All right, I just saw him log in.
Yeah, sorry I'm late.
No problem. It's all good. All right, thank you, everyone. We'll kind of open the meeting of the Parks Foundation and Quality of Life Policy Committee and call the meeting to order. First thing on the agenda is the approval of minutes. Any changes,
None for me.
committee members?
I have none.
Councilmember Marcano, any questions, changes?
Nothing for me.
All right, and nothing from me as well, so we'll approve the minutes. Any announcements?
This is Brooke Bell. I have no announcements.
All right. Council members?
Nope.
None. All right. And we'll move on to our first agenda item, which is 2024 medians. Nicole.
All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Nicole Ankeny, and I'm the manager of planning, design, and construction for the pros department. Today, we're going to discuss the 2024 medians, and you will find we're doing our process slightly differently. Typically, what occurs is that we wait until the 2024 budget has been approved and then come to council to seek approval for the projected projects for that budget. In this instance, what we're trying to do is flip-flop that and essentially bring the proposed projects to you all prior to approving the 2024 median budget. Next slide, please. So as you may recall, we have three different categories of medians. Those that are undeveloped, which you can see on the left, and essentially that means that there is no existing curb and gutter. In the middle, we consider those to be partially developed. Those have curb and gutter and are essentially ready to be landscaped. And then, as you can see on the far right, those have been landscaped with our xeric median program. Next slide, please. This map illustrates all of the medians that have been completed to date. Please note our program began in 2015 as we looked to go more xeric and do cost reduction with still keeping our medians throughout the city to be aesthetically pleasing. We still have over 50 miles of medians that do need to be landscaped. Since 2015, we have completed over 12 miles. We have approximately 6 miles that are in progress right now. But you can see here the green indicates those medians that have been completed to date. We have the darker blue that is under construction, a lighter blue or cyan that is in design currently. The red ones are the proposed that you will see shortly for 2024. And then the ones in yellow are essentially eligible for future improvements. And please note with this map, there are several medians that do not show up on this GIS map because they're without curb and gutter at this point in time, and we typically work with Public Works on those type of projects. Next slide, please. So on an average basis each year, the median program typically receives about $1.25 million. Of course, this will be contingent upon City Council's approval of the 2024 budget this fall. And also note that we always anticipate about 10% for design, survey, and permitting costs. Though a lot of the design work is done in-house, there are some outside engineering costs and permits and so forth that we have to account for. So my department, or my division, Planning, Design, and Construction, goes through a selection process. And essentially, we have a scoring matrix that utilizes many different factors as we try to propose these projects and, of course, keep them within budget. So, of course, first and foremost, we look at that status, whether the medians are undeveloped without curb and gutter, whether they're partially developed or already landscaped. Then our primary focus is safety concerns, because of course we must address all safety concerns first and foremost. We also take into consideration resident as well as council requests. We look at the economic development and adjacent land uses, such as whether it's commercial, industrial, residential. We also keep track of whether or not a proposed median would complete an entire section, because of course the goal is to get large sections achieved, and so we do keep track of that in our analysis. We of course also look at our wards. We want to ensure that there is some geographical equity going on across the city, and we do a lot of coordination with Public Works. Medians that may score high in our matrix, of course, have to be cross-checked with other departments' scheduled projects, whether that be for roadway or even utility construction. So even if they score high on our list, if they are proposed to be under construction by another department, we will put those on hold temporarily because, excuse me, we do want to make sure that we're being good stewards of our taxpayer dollars. Next slide, please. And these are the recommended projects for the 2024 medians. So you'll see the scores to the left, and we have these proposed in the order in which they scored. And the overall cost right now is, with today's cost, we're using the current numbers from the last bid that we received earlier this year. So we're around 1.67 million. So that would potentially put us a little bit over our 1.25. So what we're proposing to do is have City Council approve these projects, recognizing that we will need to be within budget. So if we are unable to get all of these projects done, we would start from the bottom and put those on hold until the next year. But the first project proposed is Airport. That would run from 6th Avenue to East Centertech Parkway. You can see the estimated cost there is about $260,000. The second project we're proposing is Iliff Avenue, and that would run from Buckley to Telluride. That one's a little bit more, $307,000. Number 3 is East 38th Avenue from Tower to Himalaya. That one comes in, are actually, as far as these projects go, our highest price median just because of the amount of space there, $553,000. Project 4 would be 6th Avenue, Chambers to Airport. That one has a much smaller landscape area, so that one's going to cost approximately $74,000. And then if we have the budget for it, we would like to do Chambers from Smith to Colfax. And that one comes in around $474,000. You can also see with this chart whether or not there was a resident request, as well as which ward it falls within, and the economic development or land use. So C is commercial, I is industrial, and R is residential. POS is, of course, parks and open space. I think I've got, MU is mixed use. Next slide, please. This map shows you some of the same information, but it does show you the map to the left so that you can see exactly where in the city those fall. Next slide, please. The next series of slides gives you a little bit more of a zoomed in look of what the current condition of the median is and the extent to which it runs. It also shows you the length and the width and the cost again, so you get a sense of the length versus the width, which of course plays into our factor when we run the cost analysis. So Airport Road would be within wards 2 and 3. It's about a half-mile long. It is a little bit wider at 21 feet, and so that is why you're seeing that cost at about $260,000. Next, please. Iliff Avenue, that one is between wards 4 and 5. It runs about a half mile, and the width on average is 18 feet, and the cost there is about $307,000. Next slide, please. Here you can see East 38th Avenue from Tower to Himalaya. This one does fall within Ward 2. It's just a little bit over a mile, and it is a little bit narrower at 13 feet with a total cost of $553,000. Next, please. For the fourth project, we have 6th Avenue from Chambers to Airport. This one does fall within Ward 3. It is a little bit over a half a mile. It has a width of 13 feet and a cost of $74,000. And as I mentioned, this one just has a much smaller landscape footprint than the others. Next slide. And finally, we have Chambers from Smith to Colfax. This one falls within Ward 1 and 2. This one is a little bit over a mile, and you can see it is fairly wide at about 20 feet on average, with a cost of approximately $474,000. Next slide. To give you an update on the 2021 medians, those are currently under construction contract. The contractor is beginning the week after the 4th of July, so that'll begin the week of July 10th. And this is the list in which the order in which the contractor has proposed constructing them. So we'll have the Smoky Hill and Buckley. That one is actually a landscape repair. Public Works did have to come in and do a left turn lane. So that one is actually an addition to the 2021 medians, only because we need to get that one repaired. due to some of the left turn lane that had to go in there. Then the remaining one, South Xanadu Way at I-25, there's a streetscape that's south of the hotel, South Peoria Street, South Chambers Road, East Aurora Parkway, and then finally North Chambers Road. So that's the order in which the construction will occur. So we're excited to get those going after the 4th of July holiday. Next slide, please. And the 2022-2023 medians, an update on those were approved at City Council at the end of November of last year. So we are currently in the process of finalizing our surveying. And once that surveying is complete, the design will begin. And just as a refresher, we were had a long list, which is really great. We had North Tower Road from 38th to I-70, East 6th Ave, from Potomac to Sable, South Chambers Road from Alameda to Mississippi, South Peoria Street from Iliff to Yale, South Peoria Street from Yale to Parker, South Airport Boulevard, Center Tech Parkway to Alameda, South Buckley Road from Alameda to East Exposition Drive, and last but not least, East Hamden Avenue, Buckley to Tower. Next slide, please. The Smoky Hill medians, you all might recall, there were $250,000 approved during the spring workshop. That is for the design of curb, gutter, and landscaping. So the median landscaping here will be our xeric design on the end caps, and then we'll have some native grass seeding in the middle of those. Because the curb and gutter is not in, this is technically outside of our median program. However, Pros and Public Works are currently coordinating to establish a project timeline, since a lot of design work needs to go in on the Public Works side of things. And I did want to point out that these funds were approved during that spring workshop and are not in the typical $1.25 million allocated for the median project. The sections for Smoky Hill will include South Piccadilly Street to South Saddle Rock Trail, and then South Saddle Rock Trail to South Ponderosa Trail. Next slide, please. So the question before you today is, does the committee approve the 2024 median projects and request that they move forward to study session? Understanding that we will have to remain within budget, whatever the final budget is approved later this fall. And those projects again are Airport, Iliff Avenue, East 38th Avenue, 6th Avenue, and Chambers.
Questions from committee members? Councilmember Murillo.
Thank you, Councilmember Medina. Yeah, I have a couple of questions. So the project that would impact Ward 1 is like the first on the chopping block. And looking at the 2021 and 2022 list, I wasn't abundantly clear if we had any projects in Ward 1 from those years. Can you confirm if there were projects in those fiscal years as well?
I can pull those up. It might take me a minute to pull that up, so I might have to come back and give you an answer if that's okay. But I'm certain that we did have some projects within Ward 1. I would just need to cross-check that to make sure that I state those correctly.
For sure. I think there was a few, like one that I wasn't entirely sure, like the 6th Avenue one. If it was 6th Avenue, then that's kind of in between wards 1 and 3. So not quite just Ward 1, if you will. And just seeing a lot of the projects just outside of like any visible impact in the district. So if you're able to double check that, that would be great. I guess more of like a comment outside of my questions is, you know, if there's not, you know, money, then the one project in Ward 1 gets cut, even though there's been resident requests. There's commercial, industrial, and residential impacts in that area. So I don't necessarily agree, or, you know, I would prefer that it wouldn't necessarily be the project that would be cut if there isn't enough funding, since that's the only one in Ward 1 for this round. But yeah, I think those are more comments than questions.
Okay, I appreciate that. When I get through all of if there are any additional questions, I'm happy to look that up for you and get you back the information on which previous projects were within Ward 1.
Thank you. Councilmember Marcano.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Medina. So I am a little concerned about the costs of these projects, given that we're facing potentially the loss of the OPT, which is something like $6 million a year. So I guess first I want to ask a question around the utility of these improvements. Like, is there actually any kind of like benefit to traffic safety, drainage, things of that nature with these projects, or is this mostly aesthetic focused?
The primary focus is the aesthetics in this case. A lot of Public Works traditionally handles all of the grading and drainage implications. Of course, there can be safety issues that do occur in the medians, which is one of our primary categories that we check when we're running through our scoring matrix. But these are primarily aesthetic. And I will say, in my short time with the city, since I began in September, medians was surprising to me as one of the most commented items that I get questions from our residents, yeah, even from city council members and so forth. It was just kind of an interesting thing coming in as a newer staff member and manager here. The amount of, I think it's awesome, and the amount of care that people put into medians and how they think about the medians in their neighborhoods. But it is one of the highest commented items that we see in pros.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I mean, I've also gotten, complaints about some of the medians down along Peoria, getting out to Parker, in Ward 4, and also along Yale. So I do appreciate that comment. But again, kind of like centered on, how can we maximize like, positive impact for the city? Brooke is on the call, I believe. So, Brooke, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but what was if you remember, the cost that we discussed at our winter workshop last year for rec centers for youth year round? So I believe I brought that suggestion up, and then I don't think we had our smart
Yes,
colleagues that wanted to do it, but yeah.
yeah, I do not recall that number, Councilmember Marcano, but we could look it up, and get it to you after the meeting. Yes.
It's just the comments from.
I'm gonna
like the
ballpark it here, and that's always dangerous.
Go for
I
it.
want to say it's between 0 and 300,000, but I think it's less than that. And so I would like to get that number for you.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, because I mean, from my perspective, especially seeing as we're going to cut 6 million out of the budget potentially, I would much rather us be investing in opportunities for our youth. We had a couple of folks come out yesterday during our council meeting when we were discussing youth violence prevention program matters. And one of my constituents actually was very passionate about this, and she provided us with a really great resource that I looked into after the meeting. And I mean, when I look at Ward 1, Ward 3, North Ward 4, and Ward 2, it's a desert in terms of resources compared to what Ward 6 and Ward 5 get for our youth. So I would like to, really correct that. And I think that this money, I think from my perspective, might be better served to provide, at the very least, recreational opportunities for our youth, and maybe stand up some additional programming as opposed to beautifying our medians when we have kids getting into life-altering, scenarios and violent altercations and things like that. So I just don't think that we should be focusing on the aesthetic when we have some other issues that we could address with material resources here.
Councilmember Marcano, to answer your question about cost, so the estimated cost for free access for year-round access to our recreation centers, including the new Southeast Rec Center, was about 1.56 million.
Okay.
sorry. Thank you, Laura.
For that. So this would take up or cover almost the entirety of that. So I'd rather us put this funding towards that as much as possible.
Any other questions? I've got a couple. Yeah, kind of related to that same thing. I mean, what is basically I guess the biggest cost? Because I see, like there's some disparities on there, and I know it's just maybe because it's wider in some areas of the median than others. But what is the cost? I mean, is it rock? Is it the people? What is the cost? I guess I'm trying to get a breakdown of I'm logically trying to think, if we're putting a lot of rock, to me, rock isn't that expensive. But yeah, I don't know what they're charging and what the installation of that is. But I just like a breakdown of that done like per quarter mile or a mile.
Yeah, so I can tell you on average, we're seeing $12 a square foot, and that's fully installed. And so the reason it's so expensive is twofold, and you pretty much nailed it. It's material. The rock material has gone up. Plant material's a factor, but it's significantly less. Of course, we do need to have some of the rock in there and so forth, because having it full of plant material makes it more difficult to maintain. But the other factor is in the construction and labor costs. Because these are within the medians, we have to do traffic control plans, and there's a lot of safety that goes into it that's going to have some additional costs and so forth, just due to having that traffic control plan and making sure that the contractors and everybody involved are being super safe, since it is within an arterial median.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Had one
Yes.
question.
And
So,
I would like to add that the budget must come out of the general fund, due to the fact that the medians are outside of parks and open space realm for some of our other funding. I just wanted to remind everyone that the funding that we do annually does come out of the general fund, since the parks and open space funds are not applicable for median projects.
okay. Any further questions? Not. What do you need from us if you want us to move this forward? Committee members? Yay, nay?
Like I said, I would rather us put this funding towards youth programming and things to keep our kids safe, as opposed to focusing on aesthetics, given the pending cuts to the general fund.
Councilmember Murillo?
I'm a little torn myself. I guess if we move this forward, could we have the conversation of like the opportunity cost, just kind of more broadly, is kind of like where I think I'm landing. I don't disagree with what Councilmember Marcano is saying, but this is something that is, I guess, a pretty typical item for us to bring forward. So I think it'd be worth kind of discussing the opportunity cost if we move it forward.
Yeah, I'm kind of
Medina?
I'm in the same boat as well, but I'm gonna vote to move it forward.
Chair Medina?
Yes,
Um,
go
It
ahead.
is not urgent. It is not urgent for us to move this forward at this time. We could step back and answer the additional questions that Councilmember Murillo had and bring it back.
Is that all good with committee members?
I think I'd like to see some alternatives, I guess, to how we could put this to use. You know, if maybe what I'm suggesting isn't necessarily the most feasible way as well, but I'm fine with bringing it back.
Councilmember Murillo, you all good with that?
Yeah.
Then that's what we'll direct you then. To research and bring it back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Estimates for Utah pool facility expansion and new construction team center. Sure, who's presenting?
This is Brooke Bell, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Open Space, for the record. I'll be presenting. And then I also have Katrina Rodriguez on the phone. She is in the meeting from Public Works. She worked with the consultant to develop the costs and can speak to questions around the cost. So this presentation is a high-level summary of the potential cost of expanding Utah Pool facility into a full-service recreation center, and also additional cost requests for teen center construction. Next slide. So for the Utah pool facility, the assumption, we limited the scope to 25 million, so that it would be more in the realm of affordability, compared to a 40 or $50 million facility. The assumptions are the existing aquatics area and locker room would not be improved. There would be individual amenity costs that are presented here, that would help with future visioning. And to keep this in perspective, $1 million of debt service is approximately 15 or 14 million of financed funds. And for this particular situation, the improvement would serve as collateral. With regard to construction costs, and again, Katrina can speak to these are class 5 estimates, meaning they are have the most uncertainty in the cost estimate. And when you look at the construction costs for today, it's within the $25 million mark. It takes approximately 18 months to 2 years to go through the public engagement process, the design process, the through our city systems, before we typically start construction. And so you're in the realm of the 2025, 2026 costs, which are closer to the 28, 29 million. Again, these are very high level estimates. This assumes that, of course, we own the property at Utah Park, and it assumes it would be a relatively straightforward construction. With regard to the project scope, you'll see a number of cost estimates for different amenities. The lobby improvement with additional restrooms because we had to have more people in the building. The gymnastics, I'm sorry, that's not the gymnasium. 1 court, 4 million, you would increase the cost if you have additional courts, basketball courts. If you were to have a multi-purpose classroom that could serve as meeting space, aerobic space, again, you're looking at different costs here. And then the improvements to expand the parking lot. So it's more of a menu to adjust the size of the project to ensure or to be in the realm of affordability. Next slide. I was also asked from Councilmember Medina for new construction costs for Teen Center. And in the conversation, the teen center that was discussed was a Shopneck at Brighton, Colorado. And it included classrooms, large gymnasium, activity spaces, and business and entrepreneurial development spaces. The company Atkins that did the estimation looked at other facilities of similar nature and provided a cost per square foot. You see that here, and they have a range of costs for a 50,000 square foot building. That was one of the assumptions, would be between 20 and 25 million. This estimate is just valid for the next 3 months. Again, these are very high level estimates. The size, the 50,000 square foot facility without aquatics is a part of the assumption. If you consider that the Southeast Recreation Center is a 60,000 square foot facility with the field house, that will give you a bit of a comparison as far as the size of this estimate. If it was a smaller facility, certainly your costs would be less. This estimate also assumes that the city owns the property, that it would be put on a park space, park property, and that we would have, and it doesn't include the cost to do some of the improvements around the property to have the facility there. And again, Katrina can add some perspective on that if you have questions at the end here. The benchmark facilities are listed below here. And to give perspective, the Shop Neck Boys and Girls Club Center at Brighton, which is extraordinarily popular, was built in 2017 and is a 14,000 square foot facility. Next slide. So with regard to additional pros facility opportunities, we have been looking at Expo Recreation Center. It is has the esports, has dance and weekend offerings. It's highly programmed on the weekends and evenings. Much of that is with dance. If we found a place for dance to move, this would be a great location near Prairie Middle School to create more of a teen center with a smaller investment, and in partnership with Library and Cultural Services. They are very interested in operating and providing services in that space for teens. In order to do that, we would look at Meadowood Recreation Center. We currently serve preschools, limited dance space there in the gym, and we have summer camp space. But it would be a great location to create dance art complex, but start with renovating some of the spaces to more dance classrooms, make sure we have a meeting space for the community, and it would still serve the preschool in the area. And then Village Green Center, that was another idea from Councilmember Marcano. The location is wonderful. It's near Gateway High School, and it currently serves preschool and summer camp. And we haven't done much more work on. We haven't done the work on that to look at the cost of the opportunity there. And if Dan, I think you need to be on mute. So, and then next slide, please. So considerations, and you've all heard these before. It's balancing the capital funding and operating sources, finding those opportunities to make these changes. We have a lot of capital competing needs. And then we would want to do a financial pro forma. We've not looked at the operating costs for these facilities, and so I don't have a good sense of that. What are our partnership opportunities, developing those? Certainly would want to do a market evaluation to know what others are doing and how they're serving youth in the area, both in the private sector and other public sector services. We have the PROS master plan that we'll be finishing up at the end of the year and would look to that for additional guidance. With regard to Utah, we need a little work around the Aurora Public Schools contract. There's a very old contract out there. Just need to do some due diligence around that as far as what our abilities with some of the property, and then also to free up space in that pool. That's one of our intentions right now. And then property acquisition history. With regard to properties that have come to the city through the use of open space funding, we are not allowed to put buildings on property built or bought with open space funds from ARCO. And so we need to look at what that history is, understand how those properties came to us. Is ARCO funding involved? And that would be for any future location where we're going to put recreation facilities, buildings. If it's active recreation and there are no walls, then we can certainly use park properties where they're funded by ARCO. ADCO is a little different. Adams County open space funds do allow the use on recreation centers. And then funding sources for financing, again, that just goes back to the bigger conversation. How do we balance operating costs and capital costs? And then finally, balancing generational needs. You've seen the article in the Sentinel recently, and I often hear from the older adults their desire to have facilities that are focused on their needs as well. And again, I think I know we'll use the PROS master plan to guide us in those decisions as well. Any questions?
Brooke, if I can chime in quickly, Councilmember Medina, Councilmember Marcano, Councilmember Murillo, outside of PROS, there are also other conversations and exploratory efforts around facilities to support youth. And we have some folks from our Youth Violence Prevention Office to speak to those if there's any questions, particularly looking at facilities that offer youth services. There's been some preliminary exploratory conversations there, but there's also efforts beyond PROS to explore facility needs as well.
Thank you for that, Laura. Councilmember Murillo, do you have any questions on either project?
I don't have any questions.
Councilmember Marcano?
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Medina. So I really love the idea of the teen center. You know, kind of just piggybacking off of what my comments on the previous item. So the funds that we use for medians, this is an annual and a fairly regular item for this committee, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. And $1 million is about $14 million worth of debt financing. So I see that we have a start to at least begin to tackle, you know, the teen center, one of these other issues. And I think altogether we would need how much recurring funding to do both the Utah pool expansion into a proper rec center and the teen center. Like my napkin math is about $5 to $6 million a year.
I would also have to look at the operating costs.
Sure.
So yeah, and that can be considerable. So
no, definitely. I mean, I guess I'd like to know what that might look like, not just the construction and design.
Okay.
Yeah, this is something that I think really needs to be a priority for the city, just given what we're experiencing today. So that's basically the comments that I have on this item for the moment. But I want to thank you for putting together the high level estimates here, because it gives us something to work off.
we need to thank Katrina and Public Works for her effort on this. They pulled it together in very short order, and we very much appreciate their support. So thank you.
Yeah. Actually, Councilor Medina, can I ask another question?
Sure.
Thank you. So kind of relating, actually, this is more for the previous item, but I found it strange that medians fall under PROS and not Public Works. Why is that?
I don't know the history, but I suspect it's because of the landscaping nature. Public Works would not be doing landscaping. So it's the landscaping component. Public Works does the curb and gutters, and they turn it over to us, and we do the landscaping. And that's part of our expertise.
Understood. Is that a typical structure for that? Okay, I'm seeing Laura nodding her head. So.
It is, yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Yeah, I have a couple questions. So, yeah, I mean, I think all of these things, these considerations, I've been, like I said, having a conversation with a lot of people now that I've kind of got a general idea on a building. And yeah, and I probably wouldn't put a pool in just because I know the nature of the cost, and I just know, you know, the turnover of pools is considerable, right? I mean, they're a great amenity, but the problem is that I know, having been in many rec centers, they're a constant drain on resources just because of maintenance. They never stop being maintenance, and so I know that from 30 years worth of that. So yeah, so I mean, I don't think that would be a piece of. The other piece is it possible that we could? That's why I said about, you know, these schools. Could we look into a partnership, you know, with APS to get that? Because I think that would be an ideal situation as well, because they already have some of those components, like a gym. They have the classrooms, which I'm, like I said, have a lot of these programs in. You already have those designed in there. So it would just be a matter of just retrofitting a few things to make them more, feasible to the types of programs that we would have in there. So that's, some partnerships I'm looking at as well. So I'm talking to a couple board members from school as well. And I think, I'm just trying to tie everything together because what I want is I don't want the city to hopefully have to fork over all of that money. I would like to have some partnerships between the businesses, the trades, school, to be able to us work together collectively, because the problem is not just one entity. It's not just the schools. It's not just the cities. It's the business. It's everybody, right? That's in our community is affected by it. So that's why I want to kind of make sure that I have that information. Now I'm going to try to go out and solicit that, have those stakeholders come together and kind of throw out this number, and then see where I can get some assistance as far as funding from those agencies as well, because I think that's what it's going to take to get it going. And I think there's groups out there that are willing to, put some money where their mouth is. And that's kind of where I want to go. And we'll, we can certainly add in the cost of, who's going to run it. And then, all the agencies that would be a part of that and how that would all work as well. So, yeah, thank you for the information. And yeah, it'll give me some ideas of where I can move next. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? All right, if not, we'll move on. So the next piece is miscellaneous matters for consideration. Anyone?
Nothing from me.
Councilmember Murillo?
And on my end.
I have a couple questions. If there's possibility, I know Brooke, you and I have been reaching out around the fireworks. Maybe we have that conversation because, I've had a lot of people wonder, and I've wondered that as well, as you know, that having them at the Bicentennial Park, a lot of those neighborhoods are getting congested with cars parking, 2, 3, 4 wide, taking up a whole swath of a street in a neighborhood. And my thing is the liability issue with that is that if we had a fire or we had somebody hurt or had a heart attack, how would EMS access that if we have all these cars parked 2, 3 wide in a neighborhood? That's going to be a logistic nightmare. And if somebody dies as a result of that, whose fault is that? And so those are things that I'm trying to look at. Is that I know, we do it there because it's centrally located, but it doesn't mean that it has to be there. I know we suggested drones maybe over AMC, which are a little less intrusive. They're higher up. The other piece is, is it possible to do it at the reservoir where there's water? And there's parking, there's all those things that there. I know maybe entrance wise, getting in and out of there would be a logistic thing, but I just think for a one-time event, it's manageable. I think in the sense, I mean, I've seen it in many other cities where they do that, and they seem to be okay. And that way, it's kind of further away, and maybe the people that are having issues with that, with PTSD or dogs or animals that are kind of affected by all the noise, might be a little bit lessened by that. So, the other question I have is, what are we doing with the mini golf over at Bicentennial Park? I've had some inquiries about that. So I'd like to know, like, if we have any plans for that or that building, because I've got some people interested in that for potentially something as well. So if you could get me some information on that, I would appreciate that.
All right, I will get you information on the building. I understand it is in significant disrepair. I was going to ask, it's on my radar to ask Public Works to look at it structurally. So I will follow up with that to have them do a structural assessment, because it in the inside is much worse than what you see on the outside. So let me do some follow up on that. And then with regard to the fireworks, I did receive your email, and I am open to looking at it for after for the next season. So we would want to do some research following this firework event. The Aurora Reservoir and Sports Park have been looked at in the past, and they are challenged with regard to having fireworks at those sites because of the primarily the entrances, single lane entrance in and out, and the area infrastructure, the street infrastructure is not conducive to bringing large crowds in and out very efficiently, and so and then we also have multi-year contracts at Sports Park. And then Aurora Reservoir, I would need to do a little more research as well. There's some history there as well, where things have not gone well when bringing in a large event. So, but certainly can look at those things. And also, I do have a question into risk and legal about the liability that you mentioned as well. I'm very familiar with that area. My parents owned a house for 40 years on that block. And so, yeah, I know exactly what happens over there on the 4th of July, just off the Aurora Hills Golf Course there.
Yep.
The reason we use Bicentennial Park is because it is an ideal central location for as many residents as possible to see the fireworks in Aurora. It also, because of all of the potential parking areas around this area with the mall and the businesses and the AMC. So there's a lot of places to park. I do understand the concern for the residents on that particular street or other streets in the vicinity. And then we can also research the drone question as well and bring that up through, I think it's Alphabet Soup Committee. Yeah. And we'll start working, we'll have to work on that early, like in the next quarter, to make any significant changes or recommend any significant changes for next year.
All right.
And then bring them forward to Alphabet Soup and Council.
All right, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any topics for next month's meeting?
Well, what I will do is bring back responses to the questions you had today. I will be out that week, so we'll figure it out. We'll get the responses for a lot of these questions you had and bring those back.
Appreciate it. Any other comments from council members? No? Everybody good?
Yep.
Well, with that, then we'll adjourn. Well, thank you all. Have a great
Thanks, everyone.
day. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.